Yes, I guess I should have been a little bit more formal going into this conversation because this is the guy that leads the charge on all athletic fronts. Kevin, it's Ross Bjork. He's 51 years old, coming from Texas A&M. We know that they're a monster when it comes to resources and facilities. So certainly he's been prepped for this other version of a monster in Columbus.
Yeah, Texas A&M has the number 7 athletic department in terms of revenue across the nation. So I think it's important that Ohio State made a hire for somebody that has that type of experience. I know for a while we were all under the impression that it was going to be somebody potentially out of Gene Smith's ADing tree, for lack of a better term. But Ohio State started doing its search even before Ted Carter fully sat as Ohio State's new university president. The search committee presented a list of finalists to Ted Carter, and Ted Carter picked Ross Bjork. And I know that people are going to remember his time at Ole Miss and the Hugh Freeze situation. People certainly are going to talk about the extension for Jimbo Fisher at A&M. But I think when you look at what an AD does and what an AD is going to need to be doing in 2024 and moving forward, when it comes to the fundraising, when it comes to the finance, when it comes to the potential of NIL moving in-house, I think Ohio State really pulled off a bit of a coup, if you will, in landing Ross Bjork. And again, there'll be some debate out there. There's some other people that I really trust in the space that are having a little bit more of a wait and see attitude. But color me in the category of I think this is a pretty good hire.
I think he won the press conference, which every new hire should definitely win the press conference because that's going to be the easiest part of the job. But then he did also answer questions about the Hugh Freeze situation, the Jimbo Fisher situation. I did like President Ted Carter's comment about all of these controversies surrounding Russ Bjork, and he said a calm sea never produced a good sailor. And so you've brought in somebody who has experience dealing with issues like this. I think with Russ Bjork explaining the extension, there is another job opening, basically, I think, and they had to respond to that. And that's just part of the market. It drives a lot of this, where how many guys have gotten raises because of Nick Saban's retirement? And it's just a domino effect of one thing happens over here, another thing happens over here. And you as the AD are part of that market. So you have to respond or, let somebody go or somebody walks and it's used against you in recruiting. And so all of these, I'm not saying his hands are tied behind his back, but I think sometimes with the money at Texas A&M, sometimes his hands may have been tied behind his back. But he's he's had some controversies at his last 2 spots, but also Ole Miss and Texas A&M have had controversies long before Ross Bjork got there, and they'll have controversies long after he's been gone.
Welcoming myself to the show. Thank you. I had just something I had to take care of there before I hopped on. I was also very impressed with Ross Bjork, also very impressed with Ted Carter. It was our first time that we really had any kind of an audience with him as well in his 17th day as the president of The Ohio State University. Ted Carter is just the 9th man to be the athletic director at Ohio State. And as I recount it, when I was a student there, they had Rick Bay, who was there, and he resigned in protest when they fired Earl Bruce in November of 1987 on the eve of the Michigan game. And then Jim Jones, who had been kind of a longtime administrator, took over, and he was the athletic director from 87 through 94. They had the issues with the basketball program, and that kind of ushered his time out as the athletic director. And they brought in Andy Geiger in mid-94. And as we all know, he built Andyland in his 11 years as the athletic director, 94 to 05. The Schottenstein Center renovated Ohio Stadium and set it up for the next 50 to 75 years. which is tremendous stewardship on his part. Baseball stadium, track stadium, softball stadium, everything else, tennis facility, and everything else that went with it. And then Gene Smith. Andy Geiger obviously was lynched on a broadcast of the Alamo Bowl in 2004, December of 2004. I think Kirk Herbstreit sat over in the corner while it was maybe Mike Tirico and somebody else sat there and basically lynched Andy Geiger over Troy Smith receiving extra benefits or whatever the hell that was. And they drummed Andy Geiger, who's probably the best athletic director any school's ever had, out of the job. And they brought in Gene Smith. And 19 years he's lasted on this job through a lot of thick and thin. The Tressel, thing that came down, obviously, and Urban Meyer thing that came down, and different things. But Gene did an outstanding job, and now he's ready to turn it over to Ross Bjork, who Ted Carter said has a, quote, long runway. Could be there a very long time. He's only 51, so if you figure he could go 15 years before he's ready to retire as well. So in the over 100 years that they've had athletic directors, only 9 people have done it. So there you go.
So the Hugh Freeze and Jimbo Fisher situations, as you guys brought up, are the most obvious, most controversial. It's the football program, so it's going to receive the most scrutiny and all of that. I see those. The obvious difference is on the surface that Hugh Freeze initiated all of his issues, and it was a response to Hugh Freeze and all of his transgressions. And the Jimbo Fisher is a move of initiating the contract extension and making that happen. So did he give any kind of insight that you guys found meaningful in any such way? Let's start with Kevin in regards to those two situations and what he was thinking.
He was asked about it and he didn't really, duck away from it. I mean, some of these things, he did say that, the Jimbo situation probably would have taken a long time to answer, but, my understanding of the situation is that, the booster culture at A&M is kind of unique into itself. And as to, I believe it was what Tony had said, you sit there and you get into a position where you're afraid that you're going to lose your coach because of another opening out there on the horizon, and you've got to make that type of move. And it just, it was just, that's standard operating procedure. I think the only issue there is maybe the way that the contract itself was drafted in terms of guarantees. And I remind people, when Jimbo Fisher initially went to A&M pre-Ross Bjork, Jimbo didn't sign the contract for a long time. That whole thing had been loosey-goosey, willy-nilly. So as I said in the chat, I don't really put the Jimbo situation on Ross at all. And then as for the Hugh Freeze, I'll defer to Steve or Tony, just so I don't get to go on for 20 minutes and use all the good material and leave them with nothing. He did address that a little bit as well.
Yeah, my recollection of the Hugh Freeze stuff was that compliance-wise, there's nothing on Hugh Freeze. There may have been some outside things that came down, but also he talked about what ultimately happened was it was just a personal failing of Hugh Freeze, his own thing that caught him up, and with the whatever you want to call it, with the phones and the phone numbers and things like that. That's not necessarily something in the AD is going to be like. We knew this was happening, but we didn't want to do anything about it until everybody else found out. Like once they found out that personal failing, then they handled it. But in terms of defending him early on, that was a thing where compliance didn't have anything on him, so you're going to defend him. That's basically my recollection of what he said yesterday.
Yeah, that's what I took from it as well, that Ole Miss didn't really have a reason not to back Hugh Freeze until the evidence came forward that he was using university resources to conduct this private life situation, where he was setting up liaisons and doing different things on company time with company resources and whatever. So I think that at that point he said it became apparent that they had to cut ties with the coach, and that's what they did. The Texas A&M thing was very stunning. Even in retrospect, to hear him tell it, they brought, again, I don't know if he came in after Fisher was there or if he helped bring Fisher there. I think he was brought in after Fisher was there, and then Fisher led them to the Orange Bowl, I believe, one year. And LSU was sniffing around for somebody to be their head coach, I think. And Texas A&M did not want to lose their Orange Bowl head coach, who was going to take them to the national championship, who already had a national championship to his credit at Florida State. They didn't want to lose him to LSU, so they dictated to Ross Bjork, you're going to hand him this contract worth $10 million or 10 years, $95 million to get him to sign it, to stay as our coach in perpetuity. And so he was given that to execute by his authority, the people ahead of him. He said the trustees signed off on that. The trustees were the ones driving the bus that signed off on that. And he did what he was told to do. And then obviously through 6 games of this past season, it wasn't working. And everybody looked at everybody and said, we've got to come up with the money to dissociate ourselves from this guy, because he's not going to be the guy that we think can do it. And it was reported it was the largest settlement that any school's ever made with a coach, times 3. Like the previous record was like 25 million, and this was $75 million. So, yeah, he seems really bullish on Ryan Day. Came out, said that Ryan Day is going to be the guy to lead us to the promised land in essentially, and what a great day it'll be when we're all winning championships together. And said he's going to lock arms with Ryan Day and do everything he can to get him all the resources he needs. Going to go at the NIL thing, as hard as they can, and take it from there. So it sounds like this guy's pot committed to making Ohio State a national championship team. And I'll just throw in there, for the benefit of those at home, better do it this year, because as we were talking at lunch, now, Ohio State's never had this many good seniors on a team, and they ain't going to be on the team in 2025. There ain't no coming back for 16 of these guys. They're going off to whatever's next after college football. So it's going to be a reload year in 2025. So like we say about Michigan, enjoy it now. You better win it so you can enjoy it now, because I don't think it's going to happen for you in 25.
One last thing on this front, and I'm going to have to figure out whether I'm going with the pronunciation of Bjork, courtesy Kevin, or Bjork, courtesy Steve. So I'm going to have to figure that out.
Whatever.
If I'm a Bjork guy or a
Ross.
Bjork guy, go with Ross. A lot of people talking about him being, and some of it comes from substance, a lot of it more from style, and every man should be his own man, but that this being a departure of sorts from the Gene Smith style and approach to aiding this giant.
Well, the good news is that there's going to be a couple months of overlap. Ross Bjork, however, is going to finish up at A&M March 1 or something like that. I know that I've already started seeing names mentioned for the A&M now vacancy, Scott Strickland of Florida being one of them. And so there'll be some time for him to work with Gene. But yeah, not every administrator is going to go about things the same way. And there will be a bit of a transitional period of figuring out how Ross works compared to how Gene worked. And it'll be an interesting case study to see how all of that goes. I mean, you can give speeches and try and generate money and everything else, and we've certainly on various shows gotten into this is certainly all about money and how you can get people to open their wallets and give to the the university and its 36 varsity sports, something that Ross does not want to back away from. He's not going to come in and suddenly Ohio State's going to be down to 24 or anything like that. But when you have Gene Smith, who was really kind of considered maybe the dean of ADs out there, he's been doing it at Ohio State for almost 20 years and various other stops prior to that. Ross Bjork mentioned when he was just like a lowly scrub at Missouri, I think it was that he was at an event and that Gene Smith was there as he was the AD at Iowa State. And he's like, oh my God, I'm going to get to meet Gene Smith. And, there's no, there's no, that wasn't an ironic statement. That was, he was legitimately excited to meet Gene Smith at the time. I'll be interested to see where there's similarities in how they approach things and how, there are differences. And honestly, we really won't have a true litmus test until, knock on wood, and this doesn't happen for a very, 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 very long time, Ohio State is in a position of where it's in crisis control.
Well, and Steve mentioned Andy Land, and then you can, whenever we're there for interviews at Ohio State, you can just look around you and see all of the buildings that have gone up under Gene Smith's watch. And I don't know what else there is to do in terms of facility wise. So like the buildings have all been done. So what else does Ross Bjork need to do other than just maintain and build championship cultures? And the facilities, I think, are there. He did say in the little scrum that we had afterwards that he's going to be going into every building, every bathroom, and every room, and just taking notes on everything that is going on in the Ohio State athletic department, so that when people come to him with something, he has a background on what they're talking about. So I thought that was interesting. He did say it's going to take him like 10 days, two weeks, that sort of thing, to get through all of the facilities and buildings, the athletic buildings at Ohio State, because there are plenty. One of the future questions will be, I'm sure, what happens with St. John Arena, what happens with the basketball situation. Would it be better for another 13,000 seat arena? Can you retrofit St. John? Because right now what they have at Value City Arena is just, it is what it is. It was a nice vision that Gordon Gee had, hopeful, wishful, but it's never really materialized into any kind of home court advantage that St. John Arena ever was. Maybe you could get the women's hockey team an arena because they're actually really damn good. And so maybe that's the next step for these facilities. But other than that, like, this is about as ready-made as you could possibly hope for as an athletic director. Now you have to deal with it.
Yeah, I could go on for about an hour about what's wrong with basketball and beyond just the coaching situation, just the whole presentation of the sport at Ohio State. Nobody has the first freaking clue what to do. But this is more about football, so we'll stick with that. Again, as I said, I really liked, or you have to like, his stance coming in there, that he is going to do everything he can to help football win a national championship. And I think that they're not shying away from that. And I think this is the year to do it. If there's a year to do it, this is the year to do it. So, yeah.
Well, Kevin mentions a litmus test, which unfortunately, as Kevin outlines, is more controversial scandal than anything else. It's also when he's got to hire a major coach, and our focus is, of course, football, and whenever that is, whether that's a year from now or 10 years from now. And then the other thing, I just don't know, to be fair, if we're going to be able to compare he and Gene Smith going forward, because Gene Smith just got started in this new era of college athletics, and what Ross Bjork is going to have to deal with is just almost a different set of sports in a certain way. So,
yeah, Ross was asked about what the future is going to look like. He's like, oh, I mean, we could have like a 5-hour conversation about that. I'm like, wings and beer. I mean, but we'll see about that. But with the Charlie Baker situation, I think Tony asked about that about bringing NIL in-house, and there's a lot of things going on. He's walking into the Big Ten as it moves to 18 teams, but how far away are we from a split off in Division 1A? And how is that going to be operated, and what does that look like? And he is definitely coming in at a very interesting and critical point of collegiate athletics. I mean, college athletics are going to be there. I mean, that was something he said during, I believe it was him. I mean, because we had such a great speech from Ted Carter as well, and a lot of questions there. But it'll be interesting to see what that looks like, because Ohio State, there may be 18 teams in the Big Ten moving forward, but Ohio State probably carries a little bit more weight than others. And will Ross Bjork, throw some of that weight around where maybe prior it was a little bit more about building a consensus? I mean, now, with the dollar figures and everything that's there, does Ohio State kind of have to look for its own interests maybe a little more closely?
You mentioned the judging things. It's not unlike the ability to win a Big Ten title when Jim Tressel and everybody before Jim Tressel was a head coach, when you could have 4 teams tie for it. And now you look today, it's like, why isn't Ryan Day winning the Big Ten championship like Jim Tressel did? It's like, well, if Ryan Day could tie with 3 other teams, he'd have more Big Ten championships. It's a different set of circumstances, and what Ross Bjork is walking into, what Ryan Day has walked into since he became head coach. Just think of the changes since Ryan Day became head coach in college football, with NIL, with COVID, with instant transfers, with the 5th year, the COVID year. Like, this is a lot of changes over a short period of time. And so, yeah, it will be interesting to see how things are judged. But I do also remember many years where Gene Smith should have been fired for stuff that went on. I mean, I think you could say Gene Smith is responsible for Ohio State not winning a national championship in 2012, because I'm one of the people that thinks that they weren't going to get a second year thrown on if Ohio State had taken the bowl ban. But that's we've already debated that one. So this is Gene Smith had a fantastic 20 years. Ohio State is better for him having been here, but it wasn't always a perfect 20 years. And he will tell you that same thing.
Absolutely agree with all that. Remarkable guy and did a great job. However, if that could be proven, Tony, man, that overshadows.
It is proven, because where's the second year of the bowl ban? Boom! I just proved it. There wasn't one. So I know Kevin disagrees with me. I know other people disagree with me. Where's the second year? Where is the second gunman? There isn't one.
Well, not to relitigate this, counselor, but I think it was a case of everybody knew 11 was going to be a bit of a lost year. Ohio State ends up 6-7. It would have been 6-6 if it would have self-imposed. I just don't think that the NC2A would have seen enough teeth in that punishment, because they were really, really mad for 12 to get off scot-free. And I'll tell you this, if Ohio State doesn't have a bowl ban in 12, do they play as free and loose as they did year 1 under Meyer, and do they go 12-0? I mean, there's a lot of what ifs in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Tony and I will disagree until the end of time on whether or not a second year bowl ban's there. And I can appreciate and understand and make an argument for all of his arguments there. I don't see it as intellectually dishonest. I just have a difference of opinion on it.
I think that's a great scenario there. That's an interesting thing, where if it isn't us against the world, or you're just trying to you've got that motivation. If that motivation is no longer there, but then you are playing for something. But I do think that team was driven by the fact that they couldn't play for anything, and that was one of the things that motivated them.
Yeah, impossible to measure. If the head coach was Gene Chizik and not Urban Meyer, then I would tend to think, okay, well, this was maybe a one-shot deal. But that guy kind of proved that he could win championships at other times. So that kind of legitimizes that 12-0 run for me, and their ability to win a postseason game.
Gene Smith should also thank Urban Meyer for his national championship, because Cam Newton was signed by Urban Meyer, but eventually got booted out of Florida.
Yes, he did. That's right. David Greenshield, to wrap up the AD portion of this, and I believe Steve addressed this, did Rick Bay resign in protest over the firing of Coach Earl Bruce, 1987?
Yeah, obviously that's what happened on that Monday. The president, Edward Jennings, told Rick Bay they just lost at home to Iowa in just an unthinkable fashion. And I think that the tight end,
Marv Cook.
Thank you. I was just getting ready to say Marv Cook caught a pass down the sideline, rumbling, bumbling, stumbling like 35 yards to win the game in the final minute, and unthinkable loss. And so then they were at that point 3-6, 3-6-1, or no,
5-4-1.
5-4-1. Yeah, I got my years confused because they ended up 6-4-1 when they beat Michigan the following week. And Rick Bay said, "I'm not going to do that." And it was interesting. Rick Bay then went to work, I think, with the New York Yankees as the president for George Steinbrenner of the Yankees for a while after he left Ohio State. But he was a guy that had tremendous vision. He brought Gary Williams to Ohio State to be the basketball coach. And he was a great hire, obviously. And that was a wild week. It was Columbus Monthly, the magazine, did a cover story saying the week the town went crazy, and it was turbulent times for sure.
I don't think I've ever taken this show down a basketball road, but was there a better in-game coach than Gary Williams?
Dude, he could take his 5 guys and beat your 5 guys, and then he could take your 5 guys and beat, his 5 guys. I mean, that's how good he was. The one guy he couldn't beat was Bobby Knight. Indiana had their number. Of course, they won a championship one of those years in '87 with Steve Alford, so they also had pretty good teams at that point. But Ohio State got the commitment of Jim Jackson when Randy Ayers was assistant and Gary Williams was the head coach. It would have been interesting if Williams had been the coach if they win a national championship. But again, going against some really good Duke and UNLV and Michigan teams in the years that would follow. So, perhaps not. But it was. Those were high times, man. That was good. Good. The basketball was the main attraction at that point. The football was so bad that you had to wait till November to get excited about something.
Yeah, Gary predated me barely here in Columbus, but I'll say this of my knowledge of Gary, he had a very wide and verbose vocabulary.
He sure did.